Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. It's Thanksgiving week. I had a few puns that I'll skip. So we're taping this early in the week in case you want to tune out your relatives and listen to this later on. The Browns fell to 3-7 with a loss to the Buffalo Bills in Detroit. I never figured I'd have to say that sentence. And have one more game before Deshaun Watson returns. Here to break it all down is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Scott, how are you? I'm hanging in. Boy, yeah. I mean, if we're better than the relatives, then the listeners have some serious problems. But anyway, yeah, no, that's good. Um, yeah, I'm ready. Tomorrow, I got a big project I've been working on at work on Go in the morning. We're doing our hometown series, so doing a special on St. Raphael's where I went grade school and church growing up in Bay Village, and special something that I do with my daughter now. She plays the guitar, and I used to play the bass guitar. So we jammed out together, and it should be a fun story. So if you get a chance, tune in or check it out on social media.
Oh, that's fun. We used to play St. Raphael's in it wasn't CYO basketball. It was like the West Side Suburban League when I was at St. Mary's in Berea, and a bunch of my buddies send their kids there right now. So that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's good. I mean, St. Chris, St. James, back there used to be St. Richard's, no more.
Yeah.
St. Angela, St. Brendan, St. Bernadette. So all on the west side.
Those are all the ones we played.
So good stuff there.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, I know. Memory lane. I think when I played at St. Raphael's football, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we never lost a game. I think we were like 20-0-1.
Holy man.
I think combined. Yeah, we were really good. So it was fun. But anyway, I guess on Thanksgiving week we can take a trip down memory lane. And let's be honest, it's probably more exciting to talk about than what we're about to now. I guess my first question is, what was it like in there? Someone that I know was there said it felt kind of like a bowl game, a college bowl game. But what was the environment like, especially after all that snow and everything during the weekend? And we pretty much figured when we talked last this might happen. So what was it like?
Yeah, you know what? It was pretty cool. And I don't know if you've been in that press box or not, Judd, but because it's a dome, it's open, right? So you get to hear the crowd like you're sitting in the crowd, and you're way high up. You're as high up as you can go, the 7th floor of Ford Field. But that's different because in Cleveland, you're inside the press box. You can hear stuff, but you can't hear it the same. And this is loud. I had a headache. It's loud music. It's cheering. But it's cool to be able to experience that and get the true feel for the environment. And there were 50,000 people there. I think there was 52 some, and it's a 65,000 seat stadium. So it wasn't completely full. They sold all those tickets, and I think it was 3 hours. I was mostly Bills fans. I don't know if it was 60-40, 65-35, definitely more Bills fans, but it was their home game that you had to buy tickets through their app, whether or not you were a season ticket holder or just through the Bills app once the season ticket holders got to buy their tickets. But, I saw there was plenty of orange there when Amari Cooper caught his touchdowns and made catches. There was a loud Coop chant, but the Bills were louder because there were more of them. But even in the hotel, I stayed up there Saturday night, and the hotel was full of Bills fans and Browns fans. And the same thing when went out to dinner. So it was a cool experience. And I was glad we didn't have to make that drive through 6 feet of snow.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know if I want to talk too much about the game, but I mean, obviously we have to. But really, I think it's just the same old story, right? I mean, a strong start. You're like, here we go. They get the lead. The Bills very lethargic. Maybe they were a little tired from having to just get there. What a wild adventure they had to go on just to get there. Maybe that was the case with them. I don't know, but it wasn't the Bills team that you normally see for the first quarter and a half at least. But same old story, right?
A lot of it, look good early. They hung around. The Browns, not only they hang around, they dominated early. But I don't think Buffalo had a first down on his first three possessions. The Browns led. Buffalo's only points were after a bad punt and a big punt return with a bunch of missed tackles. So the Browns were playing well. And then mistakes started to happen. And to me, we can focus on the defense, and that's fine. And the defense deserves to be criticized. I think Buffalo had 7 straight possessions until the kneel down at the end when it scored. So, obviously your defense isn't stopping them enough. The Buffalo was forced to kick 6 field goals, so the defense, got a couple of stops, I suppose. But so the defense can be criticized all you want, and that's fair. But to me, this game got out of hand in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter. And to me, it came down to missed opportunities on offense. Because Buffalo's going to score, right? They have Josh Allen, they have Stephon Diggs, they have Gabriel Davis, and none of those guys had a great game, but they have weapons, right? You figure they're going to score points. You had to keep up, and I thought the Browns were in position to match score for score and was unable to do so. And first you had, it's the second quarter, you had Harrison Bryant and Pharaoh Brown, your backup tight ends, drop touchdown passes on back-to-back throws. And you have to settle for a field goal, right? So there's 4 points off the board. Then you have Jacoby Brissett loses a fumble on the center quarterback exchange, probably because you have a backup center because Ethan Postic had to leave. Postic had to leave on the second snap. He only played 2 snaps. Hadn't missed a snap all year. You have to play Yelda Froholt, who's normally a guard, and you have a fumbled snap. That happens, but it robs you of a possession, especially when you're in Buffalo territory. Then there's a chance in the third quarter, I believe, when the Browns had 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, tried 2 quarterback sneaks in a row, which has been successful all year long, right? Jacoby Brissett's been great at that, and he gets stuffed both times. Now you can question whether or not you should be doing a quarterback sneak behind a backup center. I think that's fair to question or criticize Kevin Stefanski for doing that back-to-back snaps with a backup center. But those are points off the board because that was inside Buffalo's 30. And then when Cade York had a 34-yard field goal blocked, his 3rd block kick of the year, a low kick, he needs to get better on that. There's no question about it. Before the block kick, Harrison Bryant, again, the tight end, had a chance to come down in the back of the end zone with the touchdown and couldn't get a second foot in bounds. Now, it wasn't an automatic catch. Some people may look at it and say, yeah, we're not counting that as a drop. I think it's a play he should have made. So you're talking about, if you just take the 2 tight end plays, that's 11 points off the board. That doesn't count the fumbled snap or getting stuffed on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 sneaks, right? So the Browns had a chance to score with Buffalo and didn't. And then in the meantime, special teams as bad as it has been all year, and defense, gave up points after points after points. So I think it was collective effort. I guess my long way of saying it didn't feel exactly the same to me because I felt like the offense, when it has lulls, has had lulls in the past, and not to say it didn't have any, but I felt like the opportunities were there to score a lot more points. And from an execution standpoint, the Browns were unable to get it done.
I just sit and I watch this team, and I think they draft a kicker, and that's not panning out right now. You can look at, obviously, they don't have the quarterback they want in there, but I don't know if you can blame Brissett all that much. But, you're not looking at the guy that is eventually going to be the guy. And then I just sit there and think, man, if they had Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, that would be amazing. It just seems like these tight ends, it feels like they're talented guys, right? But they just don't step up. I mean, and when I say that, I don't know Brown as much, but the other 2, right?
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, David Njoku had missed 2 games with a high ankle sprain, so he was on a snap count. So he wasn't going to play as much, and that created more opportunities for the other 2 guys. And, maybe they're open because of the backups, right? Maybe if David Njoku's in the game and he runs a skinny post, he's covered, so you don't have the same opportunities. But whether that's the case or not, your guys were open in the end zone with a chance to make plays. Your quarterback made the throw, and these guys didn't make the catches. And that's big. And when we talk about everything that goes wrong, I think that needs to be mentioned because I thought it played a huge role in the game along with, like I said, the fumble snap and then the quarterback sneaks. And you can, one of those is bad luck and maybe the product of having a backup center in there, and we can rip Kevin Stefanski's play calling on the sneaks, even though it's been almost automatic all year long. But, there's so much, I guess I wanted to get to this, Chud, because there's so much focus on coaching, right? And what's going wrong with the coaching. And I'm not saying the coaches aren't responsible for a lot of this. What I'm saying is it's also an execution issue. And the players have a chance to make plays and have a chance to keep this team in the game and turn the momentum, right? It feels like every time something bad happens. And I think the first bad thing that happened on Sunday was the fumbled snap. Then there's this feeling of, uh-oh, right? It's all going to go bad. It's going to snowball. And too many times it does snowball. And there's not a player to step up and say, it's going to stop. And how it stopped. And I asked Stefanski this on Monday. I said, how do you stop that? He goes, somebody's got to make a play, right? And he wasn't like blaming somebody in particular, but we have to make a play. You have to get the momentum back. And this team just has not been able to do that.
There's been some talk, question, has the team given up? Do you think that's fair to even ask?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's fair to ask. I think I don't get that impression at all. You know, I mean, I'm watching these guys. It feels to me like they play hard. And I'm not saying every guy on every snap is giving 100% because I don't think that's, I don't know, maybe it's not reasonable to expect that in the NFL. You're beat up. You don't always feel your best, right? It's the end of a long game. You know it's a loss. But I've not gotten the sense that this team in general is not giving 100% effort. I just haven't gotten that, Chud. Do you see it differently?
Yeah, I don't think that they've given up. No, I don't. I mean, especially with the way they come out at the beginning of the game and the fact that, even in these games that they lose, there's been games where they potentially could have taken it if one thing goes this way or one goes another. So, I don't think it's necessarily lack of effort.
I agree. And I, you can call them garbage touchdowns, and I get it. But the offense obviously did not give up the other day. They scored 2 touchdowns in the last, whatever it was, 5 or 6 minutes, right? They have a chance at an onside kick to have a miracle force overtime, and it goes off Ronnie Harrison Jr.'s hands, right? Like, you figure the game's over, my story's done, and all of a sudden, touchdown, onside kick chance, right? So I don't like that characterization. You can criticize a ton of stuff about this team, but I'm not ready to criticize the overall effort.
So I have one more on that topic, but before we get to that, let's just finish out talking about the game. And, what I found interesting was, the Bills love to pass, and their running game is really not that good, right? It's Josh Allen, and that's the main thing. It felt like they came out trying to attack through the air, and then they all of a sudden figured out, oh my gosh, everyone else runs on the Browns, so can we.
Yeah, I think
it's kind of
I think that's completely fair.
That they let them in, and the Bills with a ton of field goals. I mean, that was definitely not a Josh Allen type game. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's so frustrating because the Bills didn't beat the Browns playing their game. They beat the Browns because the Browns can't stop the run. They knew what they think that, it's more about what the Browns can't do than what the Bills did do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And we saw it the week before against Miami, right? You keep the Browns hold Tyreek Hill in check. They pretty much hold Jalen Waddle in check. And yet they're blown out and they give up 1 million yards on the ground, right? Yeah, it's Sunday. Josh Allen throws for 200 yards. He runs for 197, something like that. He runs for 7 yards, right? This is a guy that had almost 500 yards coming into the game, and he runs for 7. And it didn't matter because they were able to run the ball as well as they were. They had good special teams, right? Their guy made all 6 field goals. They had a big punt return that led to a field goal. They did a bunch of other stuff correct. They got the 1 turnover on the Browns fumble where they didn't need their best player, and probably their 2 best players. It's probably Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. They did not need those 2 guys to carry them. And you're 100% right. The biggest reason that was the case is because the Browns can't stop the run. Other teams know that. And if you're struggling offensively, and even if you're not, you can just turn around and hand the ball off, and odds are you're going to move the ball up and down the field.
How about the Browns running game? That took a lot of criticism. Would they have 80 yards? Chubb, his typical type game, not even close. I mean, I don't know. Where's the blame go on that? Or I mean, is that just the other team's better and stops you? Is it a coaching issue? Is it an execution issue?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm glad you brought that up. I had written down here I wanted to talk about Chubb real quick. 14 carries, 19 yards, 1.4 a carry. I mean, you never see those numbers from Nick Chubb. He hasn't had, in his whole career, it's his 5th year, he's had one game with less yards per carry, and he had like 3 carries for 2 yards. It was like the 5th game of his rookie season when he wasn't getting the ball, and they still had Carlos Hyde. So that's not a Nick Chubb performance. And what skewed it, or what changed the stats, is that he had 6 carries that lost yardage, and it combined for minus 18 yards. Now, even if those turn into 0 yards, right, it's still, he's only at whatever, 37 yards. So it's not like he would have had a big day anyway. But there was penetration, and I think you have to point to the offensive line. The Bills are good; they're good up front on defense. But when you're missing your center, and Ethan Posick had played really well this whole season, you're missing him. Wyatt Teller's coming back from a calf. Didn't look good early. I thought he played better as the game went on. Jack Conklin's dealing with the foot injury that he wound up leaving in the 4th quarter. He expects to play again this week, but he's obviously not 100%. I think you put all those things together, and that leads to what happened. And the other factor, Chud, and this maybe supersedes everything I just said, is when the defense thinks you're going to run the ball, and that's what your strength is, teams say we're going to take that away. And I expect that to change when Deshaun Watson plays. But right now, with Jacoby Brissett, I would look down from the press box and see 8, 9 guys at the line of scrimmage, which is why you see Brissett throwing the ball downfield, because it doesn't make sense to beat your head against the wall. And we've had this conversation. And people who kill Kevin Stefanski for not running the ball more, that's the reason. The other team is saying, beat us another way. We're not going to let you run the ball down our throats. And when the Bills had success taking that away early, then the Browns had to throw it. And they had some success throwing. Not enough, obviously. But I think it's all a combination of that. But they have to be better, right? You have to overcome that. And Stefanski said, when we don't run the ball well early in downs, or, on 1st or 2nd down, and leave themselves 2nd and long, 3rd and long, they're behind the 8 ball, because, they don't want Jacoby Brissett dropping back a ton of times. They don't want the protection to be tested a bunch of times. So it's troubling, because it's a couple games in a row where the Browns have not had their usual success running the ball. And, against Tampa Bay, I don't think it's going to be any easier. Tampa's got some guys up front. I think they're really good against the run. I watched that Seattle game, and they did a good job stopping Seattle running the ball. So I'm not sure it gets fixed by this weekend, even though the Browns are going to put a lot of effort into trying to find something, whether it's a scheme, a couple specific plays that they can use to really have success, because they need it. They need to have a couple bread and butter plays where they can run the ball and at least gain a few yards for this offense to operate the way they want it to and need it.
So I think back to all of the conversations we had at the beginning of the year, before the year started, trying to break down how many wins we thought they'd have before Watson came back, how many wins they would have at the end of the year. I think we were around 8 or 9. That's not looking great now. What do we have? 7 games left.
Yep.
So you got to, if you win all 7, you win 10. I mean, they go 6-1, right? They win 9. That's where we're at.
Yeah. They have 7 games left. They're 3-7. I mean, I mean, it's the math. The math is not.
I guess. I don't think we're necessarily surprised. I thought maybe they'd have maybe 2 more wins right now, or 1 more win with the chance of trying to get. But I don't think we're shocked at where we're at necessarily, is what I'm trying to say. But I guess this is the big question I want to ask you. Yeah. Do you feel like it's a lost season? Is the season? Is it just I mean, that's the best way I can ask it. Is it a lost season?
I say yes. Now, with the caveat that if somehow they get crazy hot, not even if they don't make the playoffs, but if they just string some wins together, which they haven't won 2 games in a row in the same season since early in 2021. So it's hard to expect them to string wins together. But if that happened, if Watson looks like the player they think he is, then I wouldn't be comfortable calling it a lost season. But I'm comfortable calling it a lost first 11 weeks, first a lost first 10 games without a doubt. And you're right, Chud. I didn't expect them to have a much better record. I thought maybe, I thought 4 or 5 when Watson came back seemed realistic to me. But what has surprised me and maybe even shocked me is the way that they've gotten to 3-7. Because it's not because the offense is holding it back. It's not because Jacoby Brissett is not playing well enough. It's because everything else isn't working. The defense you thought would be so much better. Special teams you thought would be so much better. And those areas have let down this team where if you just said, hey, this Jacoby Brissett's going to play like a top whatever quarterback, right? I know there's metrics that have him a top 7. That seems way too high to me. But whatever. He's playing like an average to above average quarterback. If you told me that at the beginning of the year, I said, yeah, the Browns they'd probably be 5-5 right now. And, we can argue that it should be, right? They shouldn't have lost the Jets game. You can find another win out there. We talked about that ad nauseum. But the point is they're not, and the reason they're not is because defense and special teams have been so bad.
All right, so we talk about another lost opportunity. Now we move on. Anything else before we move on to Tampa Bay?
Well, real quick, I think we need to – I kind of referenced it there, but Joe Woods and or Mike Prefer, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, they're not making a move, right? Kevin Stefanski, he got asked about it directly twice and said, we're focused on this week and getting a win. So he didn't even say – he didn't give a vote of confidence. He didn't say, I love those guys. He just said, I'm focused on this week. But obviously, neither of those guys is getting fired before the Tampa Bay game. So my question to you is that a mistake? Should there be such a drastic move with 7 games left with the bye already out of the way?
I mean, I guess if you want to prove a point of how bad the defense has been, and we talk about it every week, and I'm glad you brought this up because I did have that in my mind to ask you about the Woods situation. But I guess my thing is I don't think it's going to change anything unless the players just have a major issue with him and they're not playing for him. Is there – I mean, you're in that locker room. You talk to the guys. I mean, is there any chance that could be an issue?
I think there is a chance. I've had nobody tell me that. And I know that people are reading into the quotes, and I get it. That's what we do. And, Myles Garrett talked about we're not placing enough importance on takeaways in practice. Yet I know how much the coaches stress that. So to me, that was almost like Myles talking to his teammates and saying, we're not doing it enough. We have goals. Our coaches tell us we need to get 10 strips a day. And I'm just throwing out these numbers, random numbers. And they fall short of that. Is that a coaching issue? Now, everything falls back to coaches. We talked about that. But you get what I'm saying? Like, it felt to me like, yes, the coaches stress it. We're not doing enough. And then when Grant Delpit says, well, you can't trust your teammates if everyone doesn't know what they're doing. Well, you can also read that to be the coach doesn't have us prepared. But you can look at it like, hey, my guy next to me doesn't know what he's doing, right? The guy goes in motion for the Bills, and no one runs with Stephon Diggs. I'm sure Joe Woods in his game plan did not say leave Stephon Diggs open, right?
Right.
So that's where I think it goes beyond Joe Woods, number one. But to answer your question, I've not had somebody directly go at Joe Woods, which, Myles Garrett kind of did that last year at one point, and I think even John Johnson III after that New England game talked about they're attacking our weaknesses and they know what we're going to do. The quotes this year are much more nebulous, and guys just haven't been willing to kind of pin themselves down. So I'm with you. I would not necessarily fire Joe Woods. If they did, I wouldn't think it was a terrible mistake. I might reek of desperation a little bit from Kevin Stefanski because I think it's against his personality, right, to make this kind of move in season. So I would kind of question that a little bit, like, is Kevin kind of, wavering, is he wobbling on his kind of core beliefs? But you're right. So I think the reason I would make that switch is if I felt like the players were no longer playing for Joe Woods, and I cannot say that it's reached that point. Maybe it has, but I'm not ready to say that.
That's the only way I would do it is if you knew internally you just had to make the move because you could not get through the rest of the year. Now, on a positive note, on a negative note, they ended the year so good on defense last year, and that's why there was all that excitement. Right. But again, I don't think the competition, remember how weak their schedule was at the end of last year? So, there's that to consider. And certainly I mean, if he did get fired, you wouldn't say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that." I mean, obviously it's been terrible, but you make a lot of good points about that. It's a perfect example with the Diggs play. That's on the players. But one thing I will say, I just think it's not fair. I don't think Jimmy Haslam and the organization and the front office put this team in a position to where we can really criticize the coaches and the players because of the Deshaun Watson situation hanging over their heads. Now, I'm not giving them an excuse, but I think I need to see the whole season before we start saying what necessarily has to happen, if that makes sense. I don't, when Watson comes back, I'm going to bring up this, and when LeBron James was on the Cavs, he made that team better because he was the best player in the game. He made guys that would have been it never would have succeeded without him, right? They never would have gotten to the championship type level of a team. And my question to you is, when you bring Watson in, and this is if they can get over the black cloud that surrounds them with the whole off the field issues.
Sure.
But let's say Watson comes in and turns everything around offensively. Does that then feed into the defense where when you have more confidence and you feel like you're in a better situation, all of a sudden, because we always hear the talents there on defense. Do you know what I mean? Do you think one guy can just change it all around to where you're in those big games and then the defense and the special teams, they start playing better because it just kind of like feeds, it's contagious.
Yeah, I do. I think that's a lot to ask of him, especially this year, when he hasn't played 700 days when he comes back. But I do, Chud, and I think when the Browns set this whole thing up, and I'm talking Paul DePodesta, Andrew Berry, right? The guys at the top of the front office, when they put this whole plan together, it was, we're going to have a dynamic quarterback and a dynamic offense that scores a bunch of points, and we don't need to be perfect on defense. And we're going to get leads, and then the other team's going to have to throw the ball because we're going to be ahead. And that unleashes Myles Garrett, and it unleashes Jadeveon Clowney. And then we don't have to worry about our defensive tackle stopping the run. Now, that might be a pie-in-the-sky philosophy, and obviously it hasn't worked without Deshaun Watson. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of games if Deshaun Watson were quarterback where it might not work either. But I think you're right, number one, that it has a ripple effect throughout the team if you have an elite player at the most important position in the game. I think that's undeniable. But I also think it affects how you play the game and where you need to invest some of your where you need to invest your resources. And I'm not saying that's the perfect strategy for the front office to take. And I'm sure plenty of people would rip it and think, hey, if you can never stop the run, it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback for you. And I understand that argument. But I know that is part of the Browns' thinking is what in their roster construction is that overall plan to take a lead early, turn it over the run, get after the quarterback. Like, they have a blueprint that they've been unable to follow. And a lot of the reason they've been unable to follow it is because they don't have an elite quarterback. And then one quick other point is when we talk about Joe Woods, it needs to be said that he's handcuffed by some of the guys on the roster. The fact that they don't have good D tackles, right? Their linebacking core has been beaten up by injury, but there's also not a lot invested in there. And that's who you look to when you're talking about defending the run. And I'm not saying at all that Joe Woods couldn't be better, but it's hard to stop the run when your deep tackles are bad and are playing poorly. And that's where the Browns are right now. So this blame needs to be spread around to players, coaches, and I would say personnel department.
All right. Ready for prediction time?
I am.
All right. So let's go here. The Browns are 3-7. Scott is 5-5, and I'm 6-4 after we both came up victorious last week with our prediction with many or most people probably in the NFL. So let's see. Here's the thing. I'll tell you what, I cannot get this team right when it comes to the spread. I mean, they get the backdoor cover this past week. Yeah. I took the points in my prediction the week before, and they get, crushed. I just, I might be 6-4 straight up, but I'm certainly not that with the line.
I hear you.
It's not easy to figure this team out with the line.
It's not. And that was a tough one last week. I think I wound up going 6, but then I'm in some pool and I picked the Bills to cover. So with us, I was right because I think the line wound up sitting at 8 or 8.5. But yeah, it's this league is so hard, Chud. You know that. But this team is also hard to pick with the spread.
Yeah, no doubt. Buccaneers -3.5, 43.5 is the over under. So I'm gonna let you go first on this one.
All right. It's probably, and we probably would have said this a decade ago, but it's probably Tom Brady's last game in Cleveland, right? Or it certainly could be. So that makes it worth something. I think, I'm excited to see him in person again. I'm sure Browns defenders are excited to play against him. So I think that adds a big level of buzz to this matchup when otherwise there might not be with the Browns having lost 6 of 7. I think weather might be a factor. I was watching your buddy Betsy Kling earlier, and she talked about rain and I think some wind. So maybe that levels it a little bit. Tampa Bay has been playing better lately. They have Tom Brady. They have an ability. I don't think they've been running the ball great, but they have a new running back. I wrote his name down before, and now I lost it. I think
it's White.
White. And he adds a dynamic. He adds something there besides just Fournette. And he looked pretty good. And they had the bye week last week, Tampa did. So they won the previous game in Germany. So I watched that Germany game earlier today.
It's Rashad White,
Thank
and then
you.
they have Leonard Fournette.
Right.
And Leonard Fournette usually goes as they go. Like if they're doing well, he does well. If they're not doing well, he's kind of mopey. But then we didn't really break them down at all, and that's probably bad on my part that I didn't just say it. But they have Evans, they have
Godwin and Julio.
And obviously, you mentioned Brady. The defense I felt like was better at the beginning of the year, but it just seems like they're starting to get their groove back, though, right?
I completely agree with that. And to me, Fournette is big and slow, and he can have games in certain circumstances. Maybe in the slop in Cleveland, it could be one of those type of games for him. But I really thought White added something to their running game against Seattle. So having said that, we talked about the Browns can't stop the run. And if they decide to sell out to stop the run and they play action, you got the best quarterback of all time throwing to 3 big receivers, right? So it's a tough matchup. I do think the Browns are going to come to play. I think, maybe the weather helps, maybe it doesn't. But I'm going to go Tampa Bay 24, Browns 21.
Yeah, so you'll take them with the 3.5.
I'll take them with the 3.5. And I just feel like, Tampa hasn't exploded on offense. And, maybe the Browns have a last stand in them kind of defensively. And keeping them to 24 isn't great, but it's a step up for the Browns. Like that kind of feels like the kind of game it's going to be where the Browns play better on defense and still figure out a way to lose.
Yeah, I'll go 23-20 Tampa Bay. I'll agree with you. I'm a little conflicted. I think they could win by 6 and cover. But I definitely think it's going to be right in that area. But I have no idea. Well, like I said, when it comes to the score, it's just so difficult with these guys. But I have a feeling that I think they're going to run all over the Browns. I really do. Brady will make the plays he needs to, and look out for a guy, K-Dot, in their tight end. He's been coming on of late. I could probably see him getting in the end zone. So I'll go 23-20 Tampa Bay.
Yeah. I mean, I like that pick. I was just thinking, talk about the Browns running the ball and not being able to do that well the last 2 weeks. It's going to be hard with Vita Vea, right? He's a stud for Tampa Bay in the middle of that D-line. And the Browns are going to have a backup center in there. It'll probably be Yelda Furhold again. He's posted because on IR. They're going to have to figure something out because I don't know if they're going to be able to block him in the middle. They might have to try to go outside with Chubb and Hunt to figure out a way to run the ball. Maybe go really rely on that wide zone scheme because I think they're going to have a hard time just winning at the point of attack. So that's something to keep an eye on. You might need Jacoby Brissett to throw it to try to keep up with Tom Brady. And, they were former teammates, but obviously that's really difficult to do.
All right. Well, Scott, have a happy Thanksgiving. And I don't know, hopefully you have some time to get with family. I know you always have a busy schedule when the Browns, play a normal week. So get some turkey and enjoy it.
I appreciate it, Chud. You too. Thanks for making time. You enjoy your Thanksgiving. And hey, everybody out there, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for listening, as always. And you can read all my stories at brownzone.com. Thanks.